Usually, when you catch a serial killer, they're behind bars for life. But Arthur Shawcross wasn't your typical maniac. Here's a man who managed the unthinkable. So, back in the early 70s, Arthur killed 2 kids. He ended up pleading guilty to manslaughter. And after serving 15 years, he walked out a free man. But his time behind bars didn't change a damn thing. So Arthur started again, this time preying on sex workers in the streets of Rochester, New York. Yet, to the local police, he was just a regular guy, a hardworking man in his 40s, a veteran who enjoyed his coffee breaks at Dunkin' Donuts. Little did they know who they were really talking to. Well, Arthur's story might just be one of the craziest killer stories you've ever heard. Let's recap. Let's go back to the spring of 1972. Arthur Shawcross is thinking, you know what? It's a pretty day. I'm going to go fishing with my neighbor's son, 10-year-old Jack Blake. The pair are apparently pals and he takes him fishing a lot. But this time, Jack never comes home. Everyone in town knows he's been with Arthur last, but Shawcross denies having anything to do with his disappearance, suggesting instead maybe the boy just ran away. A few months later, there's another dead child. 8-year-old Karen Hill is in Watertown with her mom for Labor Day weekend. They're visiting friends. She goes missing on Saturday around noon. Just disappears right out of the yard. The police are afraid that Karen maybe wandered off and drowned in the river because it's only like a block away. So they're searching the banks when they make a grisly discovery just about 4.5 hours later. Karen's body is covered in rocks and debris, but her feet are poking out. She's been sexually assaulted and strangled. Her killer stuffed river mud in her mouth to keep her quiet. Now, dogs lead police from Karen's body to Arthur Shawcross's house. He's 27, working for the Public Works Department. When they question him, after a few hours, he confesses and points them to Jack Blake's body. They find him about 4 days later in the woods outside Watertown. He too has been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. But get this, Arthur's confession is a little, I don't know, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. The DA doesn't think that they've got enough hard evidence to prove it at trial. So they offer him a deal. He won't be charged with Jack Blake's murder if he tells police what happened. As for Karen Hill, he'll only have to plead guilty to manslaughter. Well, Arthur takes this sweetheart of a deal and he spends the next 15 years in jail. When he comes up for parole, social workers say he's a new man, no longer a threat to society. And just like that, in the spring of 1987, Arthur Shawcross is a free man again. But where's he gonna live? Because no one wants this guy within 100 miles of their kids. So the state of New York pulls a fast one. They seal his records and they secretly move him to Rochester. Now, Rochester is this bustling middle-class city, a good place to raise your kids as long as you avoid the Lyle Otis neighborhood. Think of it like Rochester's red light district. It's a hotbed for crime and Arthur's personal hunting ground. The first to disappear is Dorothy Blackburn, a 27-year-old sex worker who went missing in March of 1988. Police find her body 6 days later near the Genesee River. To them, it's a one-off. Dorothy's a young woman caught up in a dangerous game. Then, in September 1988, a man looking for bottles along the river finds another body. She's covered in roof shingles and badly decomposed. She's been there for a while, weeks, maybe even months. To identify her, the police bring in a facial reconstruction specialist to create a sketch based on her skull. Weeks later, a devastating call comes in. A man recognizes the sketch. It looks just like his daughter, 28-year-old Anna Marie Steffen, another sex worker who's been missing since mid-July. Suddenly, the Rochester police have not one, but 2 murders to solve. And they don't know it yet, but Arthur Shawcross is just getting started. He came into the world in 1945 in the small town of Kittery, Maine. The oldest of 4 kids, he was just a kid himself when his parents decided to pack up and move to Watertown, New York. Well, Arthur talks a lot about his early days, and let's just say they're pretty rocky. He describes growing up under the thumb of a domineering mother, a woman who ran their house like she was sitting on the Iron Throne. And according to him, his childhood was a lot like Game of Thrones in other ways, too. But you've got to take this next part with a grain of salt because Arthur is a pathological liar and his family says none of this ever happened, although some experts do say there may be some truth to it. He claims his mother started sexually assaulting him after his 7th birthday. Then his aunt allegedly started in on him when he was 9. He had his first homosexual encounter at 11. Bestiality followed shortly after. Then, just in case you're not disturbed enough, he says he also had sex with his sister. Arthur was never much for school. He was dumb and lazy, and he liked setting fires and stealing things better than class. At 19, he tied the knot with his first wife. They had a son the following October, but fatherhood, not his bag. He was more interested in a life of crime on the streets of Watertown than being a dad. Just a few years later, he married his second wife, but no sooner had they said I do than he was drafted into the army and shipped off to Vietnam. He did a tour in a non-combat role, handling supply and transport. Officially, Arthur never saw any action on the front lines, although he'd tell you different, but he got his kicks in more twisted ways than the official orders coming down from his superiors. You have to hear him tell an interviewer about one of his alleged victims in Vietnam.
And I see a woman in her 30s coming down this hill carrying 2 AKs on this side and 2 AKs on this side, barrel down. So I reach over my shoulder like this, right behind my neck, and I pull out a brand new machete. When she backed out, I come up behind her and took her head right there. I took a couple of hits, but the head came off. Body dropped to the ground, you just bled out.
But wait until you hear what he did next to get information out of her friend.
I split the body in half, opened up a pouch, and I had some C4, plastic explosives, just touched it, and it started lit up like a miniature sun. And I just laid the flesh up on top of that stick, right? And I bit into the flesh itself, just staring at her eyes, and she urinated and defecated on herself. And she talked to me in broken English, so she told me everything I wanted to know.
Arthur came home in 1968, but it wasn't long before he found himself behind bars again. This time, he was locked up in Attica for another arson attack, doing a 2-year stint. By the time he made it back to Watertown in 1971, his second marriage had fallen apart. But Arthur's not the kind of guy to stay single for long. He already has wife number 3 lined up. Can somebody please tell me what on earth drew these women to someone like Arthur Shawcross? If they knew who he really was, they'd be sleeping with one eye open. The headless body of 59-year-old Dorothy Keeler turned up on the banks of the Genesee River in October of 1989. Police figured she was homeless, probably surviving by working the streets of Lyle Otis. But Arthur had a different take on things. He claims he knew Dorothy well. She'd even lived with him and his 4th wife for a while. According to Arthur, trouble started when Dorothy began stealing from them, which sent him into a rage. So he strangles her, leaving her body by the river and throwing her severed head into the water. Just 6 days later, a group of schoolboys made a gruesome discovery. While playing catch at the YMCA, their ball rolls into some bushes where they find the body of 25-year-old Patricia Ives, another missing sex worker. Soon after, another body surfaces. June Stott, a 30-year-old who didn't fit the usual profile. She's not a sex worker, but she has been overly friendly with Arthur, which apparently is just as risky. 6 more women go missing from the streets of Rochester, New York between November and December of '89. Arthur's been killing 1 a week since the end of October. Like every time people turned on the news, bam, another body. Arthur likes to hang out at Dunkin' Donuts, where the Rochester police and the FBI agents would sometimes meet to grab a coffee, and they're talking about the investigation. Of course, they're not going into great detail, but it's enough for Arthur to keep tabs on the case. Sometimes he'd even join the conversation, saying he's warning his wife and his girlfriend about the killer. Other times, he'd just sip his coffee and listen. The police finally caught a break on January 3rd, 1990. 33-year-old June Cicero has been missing since December 17th. She's a tough woman, known as the meanest sex worker in the city. You can go, girl. The police helicopters are searching the area over Northampton Park when a pilot sees June's body under a bridge. She's frozen stiff in the ice. That's when the pilot also sees a strange car parked on the bridge. The passenger door is open and it looks like some guy is masturbating or urinating on the street. So the man sees this helicopter and he slides into the driver's seat and speeds away, which doesn't look suspicious at all. So the helicopter follows him home, and it is, of course, Arthur Shawcross. He claims he returned to the bridge by accident. Like, he actually says he forgot June's body was there, even though police think he came back to make sure it was actually well hidden, and of course it wasn't. One crucial piece of evidence against Arthur was the hand wipes found at 2 crime scenes. They're identical to the ones used in the restaurant where Arthur works nights. Apparently he makes salads. In fact, this store is the only one in Rochester that uses these specific hand wipes. So Arthur eventually confesses to 11 murders. 10 in Monroe County and 1 in Wayne County, although he always refuses to talk about the 2 kids in Watertown. Won't say a word about it to the police. At one point, the cops gave him photos of missing and murdered women, and he keeps the ones he's responsible for and tosses the others aside like baseball cards he doesn't want. A local TV station, WGRC, broadcasted every second of Arthur's trial. It's like a moth to a flame as 250,000 Rochester residents gather to watch their own personal trial of the century. There's talk of murder, sexual abuse, cannibalism. Oh gosh, I have to tell you one quick story. Speaking of cannibalism. So Arthur's telling this interviewer about his cannibalistic tendencies. We're going to get into a little bit more later, but first you got to hear this crazy story. And he's a pathological liar. We've established that. And they're kind of asking him dude, why do you eat these women? Because many of these women, these sex workers in Rochester, had body parts missing or teeth marks. And apparently, here's his excuse at this time. This was in 2003. He says to the interviewer, well, I did it. I was killing these women because I thought one of them gave me AIDS. And I didn't know which one. So I was just going back through all the ones that I had frequented and just killing them all and then eating their vulvas. Yeah, because the interviewer's why, Arthur? Why did you do that? That's horrifying. And he says, I don't know. I don't really know, because maybe to make it happen faster, to have the virus mature in his body faster. Girl, I don't know. It's insane. It's insane. So, yeah. He also had talk of possession. So he claims that his mother, even though she was still alive, possessed him and forced him to eat these women that he butchered during the war. He doled out excuses for killing everyone, different excuses that changed all the time. So one woman, he said, tried to bite him. Another was too loud during sex. A third one attempted to take his wallet. And a fourth one apparently called him a wimp. Arthur's lawyers argue that he's clinically insane. It's pretty easy to get there from the accounts of his crimes. Under hypnosis, he also claims to be the reincarnation of a 13th century English cannibal. Luckily, the jury did find him guilty. Not guilty by reason of insanity, just guilty as hell. They sentenced him to 250 years in prison, 25 each for the 10 victims killed in Monroe County. Finally, on November 10th, 2008, 63-year-old Arthur complained about pain in his leg. And he died hours later of pulmonary thromboembolism, a blocked artery in his lung. And if you like getting all the crime in half the time, it would mean so much to us if you gave this a thumbs up, and absolutely remember to subscribe, because we've got new recaps every week and we can't wait to see you back here again.